Welcome to Getting Real with Josh Boyer, the show that embraces radical vulnerability and authenticity. Josh creates a judgment-free zone for his guests to share openly and candidly. Listen in as they discuss life, philosophy, passion, drive, empowerment, and purpose. Join us as we seek to leave our world better than we found it and send ripples of positive, lasting change out into the world.
Super excited because, like we talked about before the podcast, you're a veteran. But
I am.
I wanted to talk to somebody that was kind of doing other stuff than shooting and running and gunning and like doing something that's a little bit bigger and it kind of spreads the the spectrum of what the podcast is about.
Sure.
So I want to hear your story. What you did. We can talk about your military experience if you want. Just kind of your upbringing, going into the military, what you're doing now.
Yeah.
And where you see yourself going in the future. And we'll take it from there. So
that sounds good.
It's your show. Take it away.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me
on
the show. I've enjoyed listening to some of your podcasts.
Awesome. I appreciate
that.
And
I know a handful of the folks you've had on here, so I'm a little bit humbled that you even have some slug like me.
Stop it.
But, as you said, we're here in Anaheim, California. It's kind of a long way from where I grew up in very rural, kind of Mayberry RFD style, rural New York. I was just back there for a few days near Syracuse, but I grew up south of Buffalo near the Pennsylvania border.
Okay.
It was kind of outwardly it looked like, this bucolic type of setting, but there's always the backstory. Right?
That's right.
There's always a backstory.
Yeah, for sure. Let's hear it.
And but it was, I grew up. My father was worked in a factory there. He was a World War II vet, Marine vet. Was on Iwo Jima, and he wasn't a big, I think, outwardly flag waving patriot kind of guy, but he certainly didn't run away from it either. Right? We always had an American flag flying out front, but he never pushed us to go into the military by any stretch.
Nice.
But I have a twin brother who is one of my heroes in my life. He's just an amazing guy. And it was just a bucolic setting, small town, graduating class of about 100 people. I graduated right near the bottom of the class, though, to be honest with you. It turns out I'm dyslexic. Didn't know that.
Right.
When I was growing up.
Look at you now.
Well, I think most of my teachers and counselors thought I was just adult.
Right.
Funny thing, my parents both passed away about 15 years ago, 2 days apart, and so and so my twin brother and I were there at the funeral. With the rest of my family, but we were standing next to each other as people were leaving the funeral, and one of the school teachers came up to us and said, "We had no idea that you boys were going to do so well in life." And I was like, Yeah, I know. You treated us that way too. I had, what is it like, 7th grade or something? You go in and speak to the school counselor and they say, "What do you want to be, Josh, when you grow up?" And I told this woman, I said, "I want to be a veterinarian." And she chuckled and just said, "Honey,
that's cute.
You're not, yeah, that's cute, but you're not smart enough to be a vet."
Wow.
She literally said that.
Wow.
She said, "But if you want to be around animals, we could get you into FFA, Future Farmers of America, and you could be around animals." And that stuck with me. When somebody from authority tells you that you're not smart enough, it already reinforces the negative chatter that a lot of us have in our lives.
Absolutely.
And so I just accepted that that's what my life is going to be.
Wow.
But I always had this internal struggle, like I'm better than this, I'm bigger than this, there's something going on. And so at a young age, I kind of knew I wanted to be a business owner, but I had no idea what that meant. My father was a working class guy, as I told you. No one in my family had been an entrepreneur or a business owner. And in fact, my father, rest his soul, was a great guy in some ways, but he looked at business ownership as the man.
Right.
And the man was keeping people down.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing of a local restaurateur who had declared bankruptcy, or the business had declared bankruptcy for reorganization. And he just couldn't believe that this guy declared bankruptcy and was able to keep his house and all this other stuff. It's like, yeah, but he also kept people employed. Yeah. He was taking risk. If you've been in business ownership, you know that a lot of people have struggled with do I declare BK or not? But anyway, so being a business owner was kind of looked down upon in my family. But I knew ultimately that's what I wanted to do.
I feel like it is in a lot of families, right? Like it's like the small man's like kind of thing. It's like, oh, don't get too big. Don't be too big for your britches. You know, kind of play small ball. And that's kind of the deal, you know?
That saying that you just said, don't get too big for your britches, is exactly, that was the message I got over and over again. And what I look at it now is it's what they knew. All of it, that's how we are. You know, we show up with what we know, with what our experiences are. So anyway, my twin brother and I, we moved out of our parents' house when we were 17, got an apartment. He was working as a produce manager at a local grocery store. I was working as a swing manager at a McDonald's. And we were just doing martial arts on the side. And I came out to a martial arts tournament, I think it was 1982, out here in San Jose, California. Yeah. And it kind of really opened my eyes to the world, what could be. I had no idea. I mean, when you move or come from rural podunk, and I say that in the sweetest, most endearing terms, rural New York out to California, it's a different world.
Culture shock. Absolutely. And I just the way that people spoke, the conversations about possibilities and innovations and positivity and optimism was something I wasn't used to. Yeah. You know, I grew up in a pretty economically depressed part of the country, and it was all about survival mode. Yep. You know, so it opened up my eyes, and then I had heard that the Army was going to be putting together a Taekwondo team for the 1984 Olympics. They were going to be sponsoring it, and I thought, that's my ticket out. Yeah. I didn't study Taekwondo. I wasn't even very good at the martial arts I was in. I mean, I was a black belt, but my twin brother is really the rock star between the two of us when it comes to martial arts. But I knew, I had heard a saying early on in martial arts that only those who can see the invisible can do the impossible. Wow. And it kind of stuck with me, right? Only those who can see the invisible can do the impossible. To me, that spoke about possibility. You got to be able to see it. You got to be able to visualize it. And so not being a very good athlete, but becoming a black belt in martial arts, taught me about the spirit of tenacity and humbling yourself to people who are further down the path than you are. So I went in and spoke to the Army recruiter, and I told him I wanted to be on the Army Taekwondo team. And after some back and forth, he said, well, listen, son, you got to be in the Army to be on the Army Taekwondo team. And he convinced me to take the ASVAB, and I did. I share the story a lot, but I was the kid that when you took the SATs, I just made designs on it because I knew I would do better doing that than actually answering the questions. Yeah. And when I took the ASVAB, I really put some effort into it and scored really high. And back then, they didn't have, well, for your listeners, there's a thing called the X-ray program for Special Forces that you can enlist right off the street. Yep. They didn't call it that back then, but they were giving deviations of policy for people who scored high enough or whatever. I think they were trying it out. This is back in 1980, early 80s, right? Yeah. Anyway, so I went into what's called the X-ray program in Special Forces. That if I didn't make it, like they would do a contract, but if they didn't make it, they put me up for what they called worldwide assignment. Right, so it's like open general, so you just push you wherever? Exactly. If they needed a cook in Alaska, I was going to be a cook in Alaska. That was great motivation. Were you pretty fit? I was fit, yeah. I was doing martial arts and knowing that I wanted to go in. I worked out with a buddy of mine who was a bodybuilder and power lifter at the time and really got fit, or more fit, I guess. So, yeah. But also, I was an Eagle Scout, and so I knew my way around the outdoors. I was kind of, even though I was a poor student, I was academically, I was a big student of human behavior, and I knew about leadership, and I knew about when to subordinate my own agenda to other people or to the overall mission. And I ended up doing really well, going through the Q course, the selection and assessment phase and the Q courses. I did well there. Got assigned to 10th group. But it was really there that set me up for what I do now, to be honest with you. I remember being, overseas a couple of times and thinking, damn, if these knuckleheads can run a country, I can run a country. How hard can it be? Yeah.
And that's kind of my attitude about a lot of things. How hard can it be? And that's gotten me into a lot of trouble. But it's also allowed me to kind of spread my wings and try things that otherwise might scare the hell out of me.
Yeah. What was the mindset going through all that? Was it like what?
Going through the Q course?
Yeah. What prevented you from quitting? What got you through?
Let's see here. I love winning, like a lot. Yeah. I really do. But I hate failing. I hate losing more than anything else. And so I think that was part of it. If I get real transparent and really real, and why not? Fear. One of the reasons I went in is I was on the run from just my own life. Yeah. I had some stuff happen. I just didn't want to. I wanted to prove how tough I was. Yeah. I wanted to prove that I was a man. I wanted to prove to my father that I was worthy of his love and respect. Totally. So I realized as kind of a healthy adult that might not have been the best motivation, but it worked for me at the time. It got me there. Yeah. And so I don't question people's motives when they get into things for the wrong reason. Hopefully they just mature. But it served me well at the time.
And I think you would be surprised if you asked, I think a majority of, whether it be special operators or just people going into the military in general, I think you would find that a large majority of them were going for the same reasons. Oh, yeah. I mean, the textbook answer would be like, oh, because I love my country and I'm patriotic and I want to serve for a greater good. And
want to kill bad guys, yeah.
Right. But at the end of the day, I mean, I think underneath all of that, there's a lot of that, like especially with men, like we're trying to prove something to our fathers and we want to get their acceptance and their praise and this and that, want them to be proud of us. So yeah.
I had
makes sense.
A guy that I called my spiritual mentor several years ago, a long time ago. He said to me when we were kind of going through all of this, like, why did you do this? Why did you do that? And he said, listen, dude, you're really an egomaniac with an inferiority complex. That's what's driven you through a lot of your life. Think about the entrepreneurship thing, think about the martial arts thing, think about the Green Beret thing. What are you trying to prove? The egomaniac part comes from you think you can do things that other people can't do, or very few people do. That drives you, The inferiority complex is the thing. I've got to prove it to somebody else, or I'm always looking over my shoulder to make sure that somebody's not like breathing down my neck, because that drives me, my entrepreneurial thing all day long. Right. I'm paranoid that somebody's going to work harder, work longer, be smarter than I am. But instead of having shame about that now, I just accept that is who I am.
Right. How did that feel hearing that when you first started?
Oh, it's a kick in the gut.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a kick in the gut. Because my mind went to the egomaniac part first. Yeah. But then when you listen, reality is your friend. The sooner you accept reality, the sooner you can kind of make course corrections, if you want to make course corrections. And so I got to a point several years ago after my divorce, and we can get into that if you want to at some point, that my best efforts got me there. And part of that was I did not face reality oftentimes in my life. But the reality is, I've got a bit of an ego. When he said that I've got an inferiority complex, that hurt because I thought I was so good at hiding it.
Oh, yeah.
You
probably didn't even realize it. I mean, a lot of people don't. I mean, for me, I never realized that I had that. You know what I mean? Like, I was just motoring through life, doing whatever I was doing, and I really wasn't addressing the core of a lot of my issues, which underneath most of the things, the facade and the, like, being the football player, tough guy, military guy, whatever, underneath all of that was definitely, like, a lot of insecurities.
Well, what did it take you to get to have the realization?
I'll be honest with you, man. It just happened. So,
really?
I mean, it was happening over the course of the last 5 years, I'd say, like where I started to really have like spiritual awakenings where I was like, man,
How old are you now?
I'm 37. I'll be 38 this year. Mm-hmm. And so I just went to a men's retreat a month ago, and I got cracked completely open.
Yeah.
Because I was in the presence of other men that there was no fear of judgment.
Yep.
Everybody was welcome. I mean, there was guys there that were, police officers in Canada. There was a guy that came in from Taiwan, another guy from Thailand.
Yeah.
Bodybuilders, military guys, guys that have yoga studios. So, I mean, there was a mix of just completely just every walk of life. Mm-hmm. And, I got cracked open and really had to own like a lot of my stuff, and part of that was all the insecurities. especially in my relationship with my wife. You know, that was the biggest thing for me, because I had to wake up and be like, wow, I've had a false idea of what masculinity really is. I thought it was like, oh, I'm the man of the house. I work. You stay home with the kids. I have the final say. I put the foot down, and that's what time it is. And that's not the sign of a true powerful man at all. You know, and I had a bad idea and growing up, I think I witnessed a lot of like women in my life just completely emasculating the men in their lives.
Oh, yeah.
And I never wanted that. I was afraid of that. Yeah. So I was like, the minute that there was an inkling of even the possibility that my partner was trying to overpower me, I would just come out like power up and just be like, no, I'm gonna power over you, because I'm not going to tolerate that. And in reality, to my partner, it makes me look like a weaker person. You know what I mean? In my mind, I thought like, oh yeah, I showed you. Yeah. But in reality, there's no respect there. Nope. You know? And that was a huge awakening for me.
You're going to have a great conversation with Bedros Keuilian, who's the founder of Fit Body Boot Camp. He talks about this a lot. And he's got a program about helping make modern day knights and warriors. And but anyway, I think that awakening that you had, more men in America need to have that.
100%.
I think that there's been, between the fear of being real and the wussification of what I call it, of men in America, what I think could be a very scary time. You've probably heard this in the special ops community, at least. My entire military career, except for basic training and boot camp or jump school and those kind of things, was in the unconventional military. So I don't know whether this saying is out there elsewhere, but tough times create tough men. Tough men create easy times. Easy times create weak men. Weak men create tough times. I think that we've had it easy for a long time. Yep. In spite of the war on terror, and this longest war that we've ever been in, here domestically, it's been very safe for most men.
Correct.
And so I think we've gotten kind of weak and emasculated. It's the word that you had used earlier. I think that's a good one. And those chickens are going to come home to roost.
Right.
So I'm glad and appreciate and would encourage more men to go through what you went through. I've done those types of workshops and things as well, and I appreciate that Bedros is doing that with his project as well. But
there's a stigma with it, right? You know, like I think that was my biggest hesitation at first, was like the stigma of owning your edges and going and being vulnerable and open and this and that. Because coming from the military community, it seems like, yeah, you say we're brothers and we're close and we're tight and like we would die for each other, and that's all true.
Yeah.
But there's stuff underneath there that a lot of people aren't addressing and aren't really talking about. You know what I mean? Whether it be the shame that you have from things you may have experienced in your life, whether it be like we said, the inferiority complexes or the insecurities, you know, or they're trying to prove yourself to your father that isn't around or doesn't want to be a part of your life, and all these things that nobody really talks about, you know? Yeah. So for me, it was a huge edge to go and be in the presence with these guys and be like, wow, I'm going to own all of my stuff right now.
Well, I don't know that I could have gone through the transformation that I've gone through had I not been through the stuff with Special Forces first. Right. I realized that once I got out of there, I didn't have to prove myself to anybody. I didn't have to prove my manhood to anybody. Yeah. But I learned the lesson too late. I burned through a marriage because of it. I'm pretty open about, you know, the stupid stuff I did to burn through that. But at least I had the awakening. I don't know what would happen if men like you and I had the awakening prior to serving. Would we be better warriors or worse? I don't know.
I think we would be questioning the purpose of what we're doing.
We would,
a little bit more,
for sure.
You know, and I think that's a detriment to the mission.
Well, particularly in a command and control environment.
Absolutely,
it sure is.
Yeah, that's why when people ask me like, do you want your sons to go to the military? I have 4 sons, and like, do you want them to go to the military? I'm like, no, absolutely not. If they were, you know, just like floating around life and couldn't figure things out, sure, you know, like go to the military. But at the end of the day, like I want it to be for a purpose. You know, like you go there with a mission and a plan. You know, not like just willy nilly because you're trying to do like I did and just run away from your life.
That's why I went in. Yeah.
You know, I'm not saying that it was a bad experience, man. Some of the relationships that I made while I was there were, I mean, hands down, some of the best relationships I have to this day. Yeah. And so I don't regret any of those decisions to go. I just would want my sons to go with a better head on their shoulders and with a greater sense of purpose.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think that I have a 15-year-old son who'll be a freshman in high school this year. I just want him to be an awesome human, an awesome husband, an awesome father, and not burn through the relationships that I have. I've got, relationships that are in my wake that I really have some significant regrets about. And I don't want him to have that. But on the other hand, I want him to feel some pain.
Yeah.
It's
balance. That's the kind of, I think especially for boys, especially for the men that are trying to raise boys and initiate these boys into manhood. Yeah. I think it's a balancing act, because I want my son as well to be a great human, to leave the world a better place than what he found it, and to have passion and purpose and this and that. But at the same time, I want him to not be a wimp. I want him to be tough and manly and just be like, hey, like you step into your power as a man and you can face adversity without an issue and you actually welcome it. I welcome adversity because you're the man for the challenge. Yeah.
But to get somebody to be able to step into adversity, they have had to have experienced it in the past. And my fear is that we have bubble wrapped our young men so much, not to have to face failure or rejection. Yeah. I'm a single guy and have tried the online dating app, and it's just like thing. And it's like, so what I've realized, it's so, it protects people from rejection. When I was growing up, if you wanted to ask a woman out, you had to approach them, which meant rejection, which meant rejection, right? Particularly for me, a lot of rejection. And so you learn to deal with that. Yeah. Nowadays, you can go through life without being rejected face to face for all kinds of things.
Absolutely.
So I know that times are changing, and yes, I'm the old, wise sage, I guess. Now I'm at that age. But my son, helping him become a man is very important to me. Totally. And that means making sure that he has some lessons where he falls, gets hurt, knows how to get up, not judge himself too harshly. And I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I think that every young man needs to be like in a physical fight at some point in their life.
I did that with I have a 12-year-old.
Okay.
And he wanted to play flag football, and I'm opposed to him playing tackle football because I played it my entire life. It's like I've had 6 back surgeries, and I mean a lot of that.
Well, the TBIs that go with it too.
Yeah, it's like I told my wife, like, when I die, I want them to take my brain and check for CTE and stuff, because I'm confident that I have some there, from all the headshots. Yeah. But he's like, I want to play flag football, and I ended up being his coach, which wasn't planned. The coach just didn't show up, and they were like, hey, you want to be the coach? I was like, sure, yeah, I guess. So I ended up coaching his team, and we went to the finals. We went to the Super Bowl. Yeah. And I was like, that's cool. My first year, and we're going to the Super Bowl. Awesome, Like, the whole team was just falling apart. Like, oh, my hand hurts, my knee hurts, my back hurts. One kid was like, my lip hurts. And I'm like, what? And so for me, like, growing up playing football, it's like, it's just part of the game.
Absolutely.
You're going to have bumps and bruises, and you keep playing. So my son came into the sideline. He had tears in his eyes. He's like, my hand is really hurt, Dad. And I was like, I don't care. You're finishing the game.
Yeah, good.
We're not going to just, your hand hurts. I don't care. It was fractured. So I a little bit, I felt a little bad, like, it's fractured and I, whatever. But at the same time, I taught him a lesson that you can play through the pain. It's not life threatening.
That's right.
It wasn't child endangerment or abuse. It was like, because I didn't know it was broken at the time, but it taught him that he's tougher than he thinks he is.
That's right.
That his mind is going to quit way before his body does.
Absolutely.
And so it was a valuable lesson, and I agree with that a boy does need to get into a physical altercation a little bit, I don't know how you would structure that. Like I said, it's the balancing act is tough, because on one hand, I'm like, I want my son to be loving, compassionate, empathic, and like all these things that are like the good qualities of a man that I think that are not embraced enough. But at the same time, I want him to have some edge to him. I want him to be tough.
Sure.
So yeah, how do you go about that? I don't know, man. Maybe Brazilian jiu-jitsu or putting him in martial arts like you were.
Sure. I think that's part of it. Yeah. But I'll tell you, I have been exposed to all kinds of people in life. I'm in the business arena. I've lived in the country. I've lived in the city. I've moved to San Francisco right after being in the military off of active duty, and in the middle of the New Age movement.
Wow. That was kind of shift.
Yeah, absolutely. And so
Special Forces to San
yeah,
Francisco.
exactly, right. And so I've seen a lot of different people, right? And some of the most new agey, Birkenstock wearing, patchouli smelling people who are supposed to be about love don't love as deeply as a lot of the warriors that I know.
Yeah.
Right. So I think you have to live through some adversity. You've got to see the shitholes sometime to really appreciate what we've got, and how beautiful love is. And I think that's the confusing misconception that a lot of people have about military folks, is that they think they're killers and they want to go out and kill the enemy.
Yeah.
It's Neanderthals, good word. Right. They're not Neanderthals. Most of them aren't. Some of them are, sure. Any segment of society. I mean, I know attorneys who are Neanderthals, right? Yeah. Highly educated people. But they do what they do because they love so deeply.
Right.
Right. So I know this sounds so weird from a former Special Forces guy, but that's my mantra to most things in life. Can't we just love each other more?
Yep.
Can't we just do that? And I know I'm going to get a bunch of social media stuff from some of these Green Beret forums who are beating the hell out of me for it.
It's true.
But I do think that could be an answer. Now, I'm not one of these people who think if we just hug each other enough that's going to take away a lot of life's problems, because there's still evil in the world. And I'll be the first one to step up and raise my hand and say, put me in, coach. Totally. But I'm sorry if we got off track there, but I do believe that my goal now in life is just to make sure that my son is raised to be an awesome human being.
For sure.
My daughter, when you were telling your story about your son coming off the field with a fractured hand, several years ago when I was still married, we went to a horseback riding ranch out in Arizona. Yeah. And so my daughter must have been, I don't know, I'm going to guess 7 years old maybe at the time. And this young wrangler took us up the side of this mountain, up to this copper mine. And it was a great ride up, and it was me. My son was too small to ride at that point. But on the way down, we were on this kind of shale, very steep decline coming down to the point where the horses are sliding. I don't know if you ride horses, but they had to jump back and forth sideways because they couldn't go straight down or even weave back and forth. They had to jump, side to side. And my daughter was freaking out, crying. She wanted to get off the horse. Yeah. And I was like, no, you can't get off. It is safer on the horse than getting off and this horse falling on top of you. You got to trust the horse to do this. And she was so upset with me, crying. And so finally it took about 20 minutes for me. I had to get very firm, like you said, no, you are absolutely staying on this horse. Yep. You have to trust the horse. And she looked at me like I was, Satan. Yeah. And she was just bawling. And so she stayed on, and I kept telling her, you got to trust the horse. So finally we got down to the bottom, and there was the Wranglers had set up a brunch at the bottom, and so we tied the horses up before the final couple mile ride back into camp. And I look over at her mom and said, hey, where's Emily? And we didn't know where she was, and we looked over at the horses, and she had her hands on the muzzle of her horse, and her forehead was on the horse's muzzle. And I said, it worked. Yeah. It worked. When she got back on that horse for us to ride back in those final couple of miles, she was so proud of herself. Her confidence had boosted. She became a little cowgirl that day. I knew that I needed to push through her. My fear was this, and the same thing with my son. If I don't push them through, help them build up confidence, she would have realized, I just need to get off the horse. I just need to quit and take the easy way. In the Army, they say, do the hard ride over the easy wrong. Yeah. The hard ride is staying on that horse, trusting the horse, instead of the easy wrong is getting off, and then that plaguing her for the rest of her life. Yep. I can just quit. Yep. I can just, not go back on the field, coach. Yeah. So those are the tough decisions we need to make sometimes as parents.
No, it's a great lesson. And taking my 12-year, I've been taking him hiking with me for it's been years, since he was probably 4.
Yeah.
And the other day it was like 105 or something crazy.
Yeah.
And I was like, we're gonna go hike. He's like, it's really hot, and I was like, it sure is.
Yeah.
You know what that means? And he's like, what does that mean? And I was like, that means there's gonna be probably 0 people on the trail.
Yeah.
And be easy for us to hike.
Yeah.
You know? And so we got pretty far. Like, we weren't all the way to the objective, but he was like, he kept stopping, like, Dad, it's so hot, like I need some water and Gatorade. And okay, cool. Yeah. Take as many breaks as you need.
Yep.
So we got to a certain point, and he was like, I want to turn back. I can't breathe. Like, I can't catch my breath. I can't breathe at all. And I said, okay, just so you know, like, I'm not gonna be upset with you. I'm proud of you for coming out here and giving it your all, but I want you to be okay with the feeling of quitting, because you're gonna know now when we get back to the car that you didn't finish the hike. And if you're okay with that, we can go back to the car and it's totally cool. But I want you to understand this feeling and remember it well. Yeah. I'm not gonna beat you over not finishing the hike or whatever. It's 105. It's hot, and I was hot too, but I wanted to complete it. More than anything, I want him to understand that feeling of what it feels like to quit. And it should be a terrible feeling. It should be like, it sucks. And, I've always done that with him. Like, hiking has always been our thing, where it's like they cancel his games because it's raining. Well, guess what? We're going to go hike. He's like, we're hiking in the rain? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. Do the stuff that sucks every once in a while, you know, to build up some grit and build up some toughness, mental toughness that you can get through things.
Yeah, well, grit's one of those things I think that is way underrated.
Especially in the business world. I think it's a huge thing in the business world. The grittiest people usually are the most successful, in my opinion. Yeah,
absolutely. I totally agree with that. I just had a conversation with one of my coaching clients earlier today. She had called. She and her husband, they own a business together. And they were concerned that they were letting me down and letting this organization down who had sponsored them, and because of just some financial challenges that they were having. Yeah. It's like, if you've been in business for any length of time, there's going to be failures. There's going to be lots of them. It's how do we respond to them? Just like the stuff we're talking about. Are you going to, ask coach to bench you because you had a bad month? BFD. Yeah. How you going to? Did you learn anything from it? Are you taking action to fix it? Then it's not a failure.
Totally.
Lean into it.
Yeah. The other thing that I've been trying to do, my aunt actually gave me this recommendation with my son, was like to give him the opportunity to fail when it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's good.
Like I'm like always trying to save him. I was like, my wife and I both were like, okay, he has this book report due or whatever, and he didn't do his work that he knew he had to do, and it's like, his book report's due. Well, if he doesn't turn it in, then he fails that portion of the class or whatever, but it's not the end of the world. Yep. So he fails. Yeah. It is what it is. You know what I mean? I want to let him fail when it doesn't count that much, where it's like, okay, you're not going to like flunk the grade. Yeah. But you're going to have some repercussions for your actions, and I can't rescue you every time that you make bad decisions,
Yeah, that's good.
And just being accountable for his own stuff, whether that be like his classwork or his belongings. Like the other day he lost his gym bag, and I'm like, he's like, Dad, where's my gym bag? And I was like, it's not my gym bag. I don't know where it is.
12-year-old.
Like, where is it? And he just started junior high, so they have the gym bag now and whatever. So he was like telling my wife, like, no, I think I left it in the car. And she's like, you did not leave it in the car. You didn't have it when we picked you up. Like, it's you need to go find it. And sure enough, it was in the class. His last class he was in. Yeah, for sure.
I was just playing the same movie. I heard the same thing. I know it was in the car. I handed it to you.
Right. Yeah. Okay, buddy. Well, why don't we get into what you're doing now? Like, so you got out of the military, you got into business right away, or what? What'd you do?
Well, I'd mentioned that, being overseas a couple times and saying, oh my gosh, if these guys can run a country, I can. Well, I really got involved in public policy. And in fact, I remember being overseas and, seeing some of the crap that was going on, and then reading newspapers back here or talking to my folks. And there being like a total disconnect. Now they call it fake news, right. But back then it was like what was being written in papers was not really what was going on in the world sometimes. And so I thought I wanted to get into the political arena. I didn't know whether I wanted to run for public office or whether I wanted to work, go to the State Department or whatever, but I just knew I wanted to be in that. So the idea was to get out and actually go to college. So I got out, my first job out was as a night auditor at a little no-tell motel in San Francisco. Yeah. Like a pay by the hour type of place, right? It was very, very seedy. Yeah. Drug dealers and prostitution and all that kind of stuff.
Was it in San Francisco proper, or like Richmond?
Yeah, no, in San Francisco. Oh, wow. In the Tenderloin.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
For those who are from San Francisco, yeah.
Yep.
At the corner of Geary and Mason, right in the shadow of the Federal Building. Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, some of those folks from the Federal Building were some of the best clients. For real. Like I remember there were a couple of FBI guys who used to come there, and it's like, oh, geez, Louise, this is America's finest. They were doing research.
Right.
Anyway, so I was working at night and going to school during the day, sleeping in the evening before I went in at 11 o'clock at night. Working on political campaigns when there were political campaigns on both sides of the aisle, because I really didn't know whether a Democrat was a Republican. So I worked on a bunch of different political campaigns and thought that's what I wanted to do the rest of my life. In fact, I was thinking, gosh, I could just be like a hired gun, like a political mercenary, and work on, not like literally, but I mean run campaigns for people, and not be really that concerned about what their policy was. Now, granted, I would never do that now.
Stone, kind of like a Roger Stone.
Yeah. Thank goodness I didn't do that. However, after being there at this little dive of a motel for a while, an investment group came in and bought the thing with the intention of turning it into a rock and roll hotel. It was early, what they call now a boutique hotel. And so they got rid of most of the team members. I was kept on, became a manager at this little property while I was going to school. And I started realizing, I kind of like this hotel thing, not so much the motel, no-tell motel kind of thing. Didn't like that. But it had business, finance, branding, real estate, marketing, leadership, all those kind of things that kind of, got me excited. And so I ended up, I was in the reserves at this point. Desert Storm broke out. I went back on active duty and ended up going to the Defense Language Institute at the same time. After that, I went in and spoke to the owner of this hotel company. We had become friends at that point. And I had decided I'd been working since I was 14 or 15 years old, never really taken time off. And I said, darn it, I'm going to sell everything I've got. I'm going to buy a Winnebago, and I did with a buddy of mine. We bought a couple of ATVs, and we were going to move to Mexico and just live on the beach in Mexico and rent out ATVs for a couple of years.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah. And so I went in and told this guy, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And he said, oh, please don't go. He'd just taken over his third hotel. And he said, if you stick around, I'll make you my business partner.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. No, I still hadn't graduated college yet. And I thought, geez, here's a great opportunity. And so I told him, give me 24 hours to think about it. And I came back the next day and took the gig. And so then we grew that company to about 14 hotels in San Francisco over about a 14-year period. And learned tons about myself, learned lots about the hotel industry. And but it really got to the point where, as much as I loved the industry, I hated the role that I was in because I was working outside my strengths. Yeah. I was in an operations role, which means you need to really understand systems, you need to love that kind of thing, and that is not how I'm built. Right. So I was working outside my strengths, plus I'm built more as an executive. I'm built like what I call a primary leader, and I was stuck in a secondary leadership role. I was never going to be the number one in this organization. Yep. And so it just started sucking my lifeblood. Yeah. And I was getting resentful and bitter and blaming other people and all these things that I don't like about myself. Right. Wasn't taking personal accountability for a whole lot of things. And I'd gotten married she is a great woman, but she was working a lot of hours as well. And so finally we had decided, it was the late 90s, and said, listen, let's pack our stuff and move out of town and kind of semi-retire and move to Santa Barbara, a place that we both loved.
Santa Barbara's amazing.
Yeah. So while we were there, we bought a couple of coffee shops and restaurants, and at the same time, I was going to go back to school, and I ended up getting a call from some investors from my former company, and they said, hey, things just aren't the same since you've left, and we want to get another hotel. We want to get a hotel out in Palm Desert. Why don't we become partners and let's buy a project together?
Wow.
So I said, all right. that was a good lesson for me because it reminded me, hey, even when I was not at my best, I was showing up like it mattered. Yep. I was still striving for excellence, you know, and people are watching no matter what's going on in your life. And the pursuit of excellence is one of those things that that's what you're going to be judged on at the end of the day. Like we were talking about our kids earlier, right? If they're trying hard, they're striving hard. I don't care whether he wins or loses. I prefer winning. Yes. Right. All right, fine. But if I see that he wins and he barely puts any effort in, I'm as disappointed in that as if he leaves it all on the field, like he played lacrosse. If he leaves it all on the field and gets his butt kicked, I'm just as proud of him.
Well, it's like we lost that championship game. Okay. And I told him, I was like, I've never been more proud of you ever in my life.
Isn't that awesome? Yeah.
And why is that? Because you played your heart out.
Yeah.
You know what it takes to have the heart of a champion.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, hey, you came up short.
Yeah.
But you played your ass off.
Yeah.
So we're good.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, it's one of the things I talked about this week at this training that I just got done. Imagine how would your life be different if we pursued excellence in everything that we do? Yeah. Win or lose, performed in an excellent fashion. The Greeks called that arete. Yeah. You know, there's a spirit about you. I could tell you this, you know, my relationships would be different, my work performance would be different, my military career would have been different, my martial arts career, everything would have been different, you know, if in everything we do. But we tend to get, you know, lazy and lackadaisical and complacent, and you know, we've got to be obsessive about this pursuit of excellence, I think. And so anyway, so I bought this hotel out in Palm Desert, and at the same time we started building a hotel in in Santa Barbara called the Spanish Garden Inn with some partners, and so we kind of launched the hotel business in 2001. Wow. Now that was not a great time to be building a hotel company, though.
Really?
Well, if you think back to 2001.
It's right before 9/11.
Well, even leading up to that, we went into a global recession in early 2001 because of the dot-com bomb, right? And a national recession. I don't know if you remember SARS, the avian flu.
Yep.
So back then, all of my investments were in hotels in San Francisco, which is fed by the Pacific Rim countries. Yep. A third of our business was coming from, or the transient business was coming from Asia. And so we were already in a recession, and then the avian flu hit. And then 9/11 hit, and we lost 45% value of our hotel assets in San Francisco in that 1 year. Wow. That's crazy if you think about it. These are multi-million-dollar assets. Because we're not paying our mortgages based on the previous valuation. Right. It was a very difficult time. And so it was like The Walking Dead in San Francisco. You'd go up there and just see people like they just didn't even know what to do. So we had opened up, we'd renovated this hotel out in Palm Springs that we had, or Palm Desert that we had purchased, opened on September 1st. Then September 9th, we opened up the hotel in Santa Barbara. And then September 11th hit. And during this time, you know, what we were living on, my former spouse and I, we were living on distributions from my former company. And, you know, from proceeds from our investments. That year leading up to September 11th, though, when we went into this recession, all of a sudden, my company in San Francisco, where I was a partner, they needed capital calls. So for your listeners who don't know, a distribution is when there's excess profits and cash flow. You spread that across the owners and investors, a dividend. Yeah. A capital call is when you can't pay the bills. Mortgages due, payrolls due, electric bills are due. You got to go to those same people and say, hey, buck up, I need money. Wow. So it got to the point where we had just, I had about $84-ish in the bank, had 2 payrolls that were due. It was terrible. We had moved into a rented townhouse here in Orange County. I had a young daughter at the time, and it was rough, very rough. The good news on the hotel side was those 2 hotels that we had opened up that week of September, in September was the week of September 11th. They went dead. Like no one was calling for that week. No reservations were being booked. But that following week, things kind of turned around. We'd done some great press and some national media publications, and so business started turning around. But I was acting out in some really stupid ways, and not telling my wife about the financial pain that we were going through. I was lying to her about a bunch of stuff just because I thought I was protecting her at the time.
What do you think that was? Pride?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. I used to have mentors. I used to be part of a mastermind. And when I started my own company and I was getting good media about, me and what I was doing in the company, I started believing my own press. Like, I've got this. I don't need coaches or mentors or mastermind groups anymore.
Wow.
Yeah, bad news. And it got to the point where I was just afraid to tell people how bad things were, including my former spouse. And so it was December of that year, and my former company needed a big capital call check, and my former spouse said, "Dude, you need to shit or get off the pot here. You probably need to go get a job. But when you get your shit together, call me." And she left, took my few-month-old daughter and left for a while. And at that point, I was like, I pulled out my life insurance policies and literally did the calculation. I'm worth more dead than alive right now. And it was an ugly scene, and my life, it just felt like my life was burning down around me. Thank goodness I didn't go through with it, but it wasn't the first and it wasn't the last time that I'd had those kind of ideations. I've not had those ideations in years because I've spent enough time working on myself. I say I'm not who I used to be.
Right.
It took a lot of effort though. But she did come back after a few days, but it was a wake-up call for me. So that's when the journey really started in recovery and trying to get healthy. And but the day after she left, I pulled out. Back then we had Rolodexes, and I started going through my Rolodex and just started calling everybody I knew. Hey, and just admitting, hey, I have screwed up. I don't know what kind of to do here, but if you've got any business for us, I'd be glad to talk to you about it. And so a hotel consultant that I knew had hooked me up with to interview with one of his clients who had a couple of hotels. And we ended up getting those contracts, and all of a sudden I could start paying myself a salary, because I wasn't even paying myself a salary. Wow. I was putting payroll on credit cards and doing all kinds of nefarious, stupid stuff that I wouldn't recommend to people.
How'd you get out of the hole? Like the hole that you had dug yourself in, how'd you get out of it?
Which hole? The emotional hole or the financial hole?
Both. Like, first the financial, because that's what we were just talking about, but and then I want to go to the emotional part of it too.
Yeah. So the financial thing, this guy said to me, as it turns out, the hotel projects that he had for me were in Mexico. And he said, so he told me about them. I said, well, listen, Jay, I don't know anything about running hotels in Mexico. I haven't spoken Spanish in, years. Learned a little bit when I was in the military, but I hadn't spoken Spanish forever. And I said, I know nothing about the Mexico market. And he said, well, give us a bid. Hire people, dude. You're smarter than this. Yeah. And so I just put together, I had to borrow money to catch a flight from Orange County to San Francisco to go meet with this client. It was that bad. Uh-huh. And I was bold enough, though, to take a contract with me. And so we went and met with this guy and the owner of these hotels. And I put out what I thought was kind of a ballsy pricing structure, but I convinced him that we were the right management company to hire, and I was able to net about $6,000 a month. And all of a sudden I went from not being paid for years to netting $6,000 a month that I was going to pay myself.
How stoked were you?
You have no idea. You have no idea.
I can only imagine.
And so at the end of our conversation, I said I would be remiss if I didn't ask you to sign this right now. And I did, and he just glanced at it and he signed it.
Nice.
Yep. It was a God thing, for sure.
Yeah.
What I realized, that day I was telling you that when I pulled out the life insurance policies, what I'd heard in my head was this word surrender. And it was just pounding in my head. And that's not something I was used to hearing.
Right.
To me, that at the time was a sign of weakness. I wasn't going to quit. I wasn't going to surrender to anything or anybody.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I realized what it was. It was, to me, it was my creator. It was God who was saying, dude, stop the pushing and shoving.
Right.
You know? And so I promised myself I was going to surrender to just reality, circumstance, and start asking for help. It's really amazing what happens when you start asking people for help.
Yep.
They give it to you. Isn't that shocking? I thought, I don't know. Back then, I just thought if I asked for help, it was a sign of weakness.
Oh, definitely. I think a lot of people, struggle with that.
Yeah.
Even like with me, like with the podcast, if you were like, "Oh, you making money at this thing?" It's like, no, not yet.
Mm-hmm.
I'll get there one of these days.
Right.
Like I'm just plugging away and I'm traveling and I'm investing my time and my money and all this travel and whatever. I was like, oh, maybe I'll do a Patreon account. I was like, yeah, but who wants to pay? Like, I don't want people to have to pay for my content. Like, oh, that makes me feel kind of weird, like whatever. And it's like, but I have kids to feed too, so I got to think about them, And it's like, but there has to be a smarter way of doing it than Patreon, I can, and so goes the internal struggle and dialogue about it.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, but I think what you find, we know some of the same people, and they go through the same struggles, as well, with whether it's Patreon or one of these other things. But if people feel like they're getting value from you, now if you're just a schmuck and you just take constantly from people, you're not going to get the support, right? But if somebody who's got if their heart's in the right place and they ask me for help, of course I'm going to help them. Right. And my spiritual mentor said to me we were going through this whole thing, he goes, what makes you think that you're so special that no one's going to ask you, or no one's going to help you if you ask them? So anyway, I realized I just need to start asking for help. And so that's when this financial thing started to turn around. And I'd mentioned earlier that these 2 hotels that we had opened on September 11th, we had done some really smart marketing and PR leading up to it. Yeah. And so we ended up looking like geniuses by January of 2002 because we were heading towards stabilization, only being open for a few months versus what generally takes 3 years.
I was going to say it doesn't take about 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. And so we hit 100% market penetration at both hotels within 12 months. And word spread that, hey, these guys are actually turnaround artists. These guys know what they're doing. And so we picked up a few more agreements, acquired a couple other hotels. And so financially, things started to turn around there. The emotional thing was harder.
I bet.
Because it wasn't just a light switch. I mean, I've heard of people having these kind of spiritual awakenings or conversions. It's like a thunderclap and lightning strike and everything changes. I'm slower on the uptake. Things don't usually stick for me until I really grind along the bottom for a while, and get really bloodied up. Yeah. I'll not so much nowadays, but back then it was still, I would do enough work to get by, and so I did. I would do enough work and get healed a little bit and then revert back a little bit. It's kind of the 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of thing. But ultimately, this is kind of it was a big learning moment for me, and it might sound really kind of perverse, but for me personally and professionally, probably the best thing that's ever happened to me was my divorce. As sick as that might sound.
No, it makes perfect sense.
Does it?
Yeah, well, totally. Mine was, for me, was the same thing.
Is that right?
Absolutely, 100%.
Because it was a wake-up call for you then?
Huge wake-up call.
Yeah, that's how it was for me.
Because it was like, here I am, like a single guy now with a 3-year-old son at the time. Yeah. And it's just him and I. I don't know how I'm going to figure this all out, financially or otherwise. It's like I'm going to try and sort it all out and try and figure out who I am, like by myself, and like what does that all mean and this and that. And I started looking at the destruction that I left in my wake, with just like with various like relationships. Now, granted, like the other side of that of my marriage with my ex-wife, like I'm not gonna say that she was a saint, but I will always take ownership of like my side of the fence and say like what did I contribute to the demise? Like what was my part in it? And so it really started to open up my eyes to taking ownership, to taking full, complete ownership of my decisions and things that I've done and the way that I presented myself and whatever. So yeah, I think it was what got the ball rolling to really start doing some like inner work and really diving deeper. I mean, like you said, like same thing with me, like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, one, the ego gets in the way, the pride gets in the way. Right. And you revert back to what's comfortable. It's like an old shoe, so you just keep doing the same stuff until it smacks you in the face again. And you're like, oh man,
Yep.
Wake up.
Yep.
So yeah, the divorce definitely for me I would say it was the best thing, and probably one of the best things that ever happened to me.
Yeah. Me too. I certainly, like I said earlier, I'm not who I used to be. Okay. And people who want to judge me based on who I was back then, I'm sorry. You can try to learn about who I am now. This is why I try to be so open and transparent when I talk to people like you, or if I'm doing a keynote or something. I mean, there are appropriate times. Like I just meet somebody, I don't just blurt out all my things that I'm ashamed about in my life. But there are times when it's appropriate, right? Yeah. And so for me, when my former spouse, and I try not to use the word ex, and this is just me. I get that I'm a little bit odd. To me, ex-wife or ex-husband has an air of negativity about it, and it's just for me. It works for other people. I'm just saying for me. Yeah, for me, the word ex, there's negativity about it, and so what I try to call her is my former spouse or my kid's mom, because I just try to keep as much negativity out of me as possible. Because left to my own devices, I will go dark real fast. I have to wrestle with that. Yeah, totally. And the sick side of me loves the dark side. It really does. And so there's a kind of inner struggle with me every day, the whole yin and yang part of life. But when we decided we were going to split, I committed that I was going to spend 40 hours a week getting healthy, whatever that meant. Right. But for me at the time, it meant meeting with my pastor at the time, meeting with men's groups, going through therapy, getting an accountability partner, reading, meditating, just thinking, whatever I could do. So I did that for 40 hours for 6 months. And I did it for 20 hours for the 6 months after that. Wow. And so I kind of got a PhD in me during that year. Yeah. I mean, how many people, and if I couldn't have done that had I been an employee someplace.
No way.
I could only do it because I was an entrepreneur. I owned my own business.
That's where a lot of people get stuck. You're paying the bills, you're working for somebody else, and it's like you got a family to feed. So there's people that I want to find myself, and people like laugh at that, like, oh, that's a joke. You want to go find yourself, get to work, and it's like, no, but they mean that. You know what I mean? Like they've lost sight of like who they even are anymore.
That's right.
And it takes time and effort and money and resources to be able to go and like do some of the things that you were doing for 40 hours a week. You know, it's like that's a lot. But obviously it paid dividends. So
well, it has. If nothing else, my kids have recognized the difference. That's awesome. They weren't infants when we separated. Okay. They were what? Roughly 8 and 5 or something like that. Yeah. So they still remember, and they've seen the transformation, and so that I've got a good relationship with my former spouse, and there's not the resentment. And after my son's graduation from junior high school, we all went out to dinner with she and her husband and his family and me and the grandparents, and we get along. Yeah. That's kind of rare, I'm realizing.
No, it's very rare. I mean, I've tried that approach, and the other side has to be kind of play the same way, or it's just not going to work.
True.
And my wife and I just came to the conclusion that it just is not in the best interest of our family to be like intermingled with any of it, because it's just safer for us to just keep our distance.
For some people, that's the right thing. But if you want it to happen, because there are some people who do. I mean, I have a lot of friends who say, I wish I could do that, but somebody's got to be the first one to step up.
Totally.
Agreed. And what you said earlier kind of resonated with me about taking accountability for your part of the divorce. Yep. I had to do the same thing. Now, granted, my nonsense contributed to it, but I don't know any divorce that happens in a silo that's purely one person's fault. Yeah. Usually there's a little bit on both sides, right? But
I think as humans, right, we always want to point blame in the opposite direction of ourselves.
Sure.
It's like, oh, well, they did this and they did that and this person this, and it's like, because you don't want to have to own that stuff. It's painful, to be like, man, I was a total asshole.
Yeah, well, I was. I mean, I do take responsibility for 95% of what had happened. Right. But I'll just, if I could kind of encourage people that if there's resentment in any relationship, you got to deal with it. Because one of the things I'd realized I never did, I'd mentioned that that we had split in December of 2001. Yeah. When she came back, I don't know that we ever really talked through what that did to me. Because to me, I was at the lowest point professionally in my life, and she left. I think she wanted it to be the wake-up call that it ultimately was. Yeah. But to me, when I was in it, I felt betrayed.
It felt like being kicked when you're down.
Exactly. Yeah. And loyalty is one of those things that's so important to me. It's one of my core values, and I felt like she was disloyal to me. And just to kind of not muddy the water or ruffle feathers or whatever the analogy is or metaphor is, I never really worked through that with her. So I knew in my head, now I'm using air quotes around that, I knew that the next time there was an economic downturn, she was going to leave. Oh, wow. I just knew it. And so did I really know it? No, but I was projecting that.
Oh, we all do, right?
Exactly. So what happened when in 2008 when the recession came? Without even talking about it, I started pulling away. Yeah. I started getting defensive. Yeah. I started hiding the ball again. I didn't want her to leave, but I was acting. I was doing all that nonsense. And so sure enough, when she did finally say, I want to leave, it's like, see, I told you. I knew it. Yep. Instead of what I should have been, I should have had the courage. I should have been the man enough to talk through it. But I didn't want to hurt my feelings. I didn't want to hurt her feelings. So resentful man, it's like venom. It's like a poison.
Yeah, I told somebody the other day that I want to work for the rest of my life to feel more and think less. And
my gosh, that's awesome.
And what I mean by that is like you were saying, like when your wife left, how did that make you feel? Yeah. Not what you thought about it, but how did it make you feel? It made you feel terrible. It made you feel like she had like basically was disloyal to you and betrayed you. And you have all these feelings of like abandonment and all these other things that come up. Right. And had you shared those with her and been vulnerable and shared those with her, she probably would have heard you. Yeah. Most likely she would have and not done it again, because she would feel what you were feeling. Yeah. I think, but we all get guilty of that, right? Like a lot of people are guilty of, we hold it in, we don't say anything, the resentment builds up and then the contempt. And it's just like, it gets to a point where it's just unsalvageable at a certain point.
Yeah. 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 It's both resentment and unforgiveness are, like I said,
heavy burdens to bear.
Well, they're heavy burdens to bear. There's a quote I heard, and I may butcher this, but maybe not if I take a second. But I think there's a thing about unforgiveness that goes something like, unforgiveness is like drinking a poison and thinking that it's going to hurt somebody else.
Right. Yeah, right? It destroys it. It's like acid. They say the same thing. It's like acid. So it's like it destroys the vessel that's carrying it. Yeah. I mean, it's not. Yeah. You're not doing anybody. You're not. We always think. I think in our brains we think like, okay, well, I'm pissed off at this person. And, it makes me feel better to just be pissed off. But in reality, that person has no idea how mad you are and what you're holding on to. And you're not affecting them in any way, shape, or form by you being pissed off.
Yeah, and they're probably going on with their life, you're not even on their radar.
Right.
Right?
Right. And you build up these stories. Like, at least I have. I build up these stories. I'm in the shower, and it's like, I have this full-on like argument and fight with my wife that's not even taking place.
She's going to say this, and I'm going to say that. Oh, I've been there, dude.
Totally. And then when you finally do talk to her, it goes nothing like you thought it would, or maybe even goes worse than it should have because I had already made up the story of how it was going to go down.
Yes. Oh, and, I've been there.
So for now, moving forward for me is just showing up and just being like, hey, listen, like, and like I said, feeling more than I think. So like, if I feel a certain way, I'm going to let her know. Like, hey, that made me feel like, this or that or the other thing. It doesn't, in my opinion, I used to think that it made me less of a man. It made me weak to own my feelings. Yeah. But it's quite the contrary.
I'm so glad to hear you say that. One of the things I say is don't believe everything you think. Totally. Because our brain does go to the negative. And I think it's to protect us in some ways, right? Not that we're idiots, but I think it's a defense mechanism.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah, because I think that's the fine walk for me, at least, have been like the boundaries with people. It's like, okay, you're not really a safe person because you're just not. But I don't want to hate you. I don't want to resent you. I don't want to I want to be able to forgive you because it's releasing from me. But at the same time, I don't want you in my life. Yeah. So for the first time, the other day, I was sharing with my wife that my mom and I had a terrible relationship growing up, like terrible. Like I've tried to go back to like as far back as I can go in my childhood and remember when that hatred or when all that stuff started. Yeah, I had a terrible upbringing as far as like things that happened to me at a very young age. Yeah. But I was like, I never had a connection with her. I never felt like, oh, that's my mom, like, oh, I want to see her. I love her. Yeah. I never had that. And I didn't know why or what. My grandma was my person. She raised me, and that was my person.
Sure.
But with my mom, I could never get to a place of compassion. And for the first time the other day, I was able to have compassion for her story, compassion for what she went through to make her who she is today. And I was never able to do that before. So I was like, wow.
Is she still alive?
Yeah.
Have you shared that with her yet?
No. I don't. That's the thing that I'm talking about with boundaries, where it's like, she's not a safe person. I don't want her in my life. I don't want my kid's life or anything like that.
Sure.
But I need to release that resentment and the hate and the hurt and all that other stuff. Just release it. So for the first time, I feel for me, it was healing to find compassion for her story. Same thing with my father. I always had this thing, like, he didn't want me, he didn't fight for me. He was just kind of just doing his thing. Yep. And then here I am as an adult, and now he's back in my life. It's like, he didn't have to do any of the hard work, but now he gets to reap all the benefits of being a grandpa and all these other things. Yeah. And I had a lot of like hatred and hurt and resentment and all these other things. And finally I was like, man, why does he not make more of an effort? And then I just realized, like, you know what? He's meeting me with whatever he's capable of.
That's right.
I can't force him to be a certain way. I want him to call me every day and check in on me and have this father-son relationship that it's never going to come to fruition. I'm going to keep putting myself out there, and then I'm going to be hurt because I have expectations that aren't being met. Yeah. So I need to drop the expectation and just meet him wherever he is. Yeah. And that's going to just have to be enough.
Yeah, I hear a lot of people talk about that's one of the biggest problems in life is that we set these expectations up for all kinds of people, and they're just not able to meet them. It's funny. I had this same realization that it sounds like you've had with your folks, but it happened after they'd both passed away. Sadly, I was able to make amends with my father on his deathbed, and he wasn't even communicative, like verbally communicative, but he was able to speak through tears and eye contact and that kind of thing. But the things I've learned about him and learned about my mother after their passing has given me a little bit more grace as well. That I can. Now, I've done a lot of work on myself too, but even in business environments now, in fact, at this training I just got through conducting the last couple of days, in a business environment, I was saying, hey, that's one of the things we need to do. We need to offer grace freely and often with people, because otherwise it's these expectations that we have that we just fall short. People are going to make mistakes. But the same, my father, like I mentioned earlier, was this World War II guy, and it was just a different environment back then. I do think there were times when both my parents kind of screwed up, but if they knew what we know now about the human condition, would they respond differently? Probably they're a product of their own environment 100%. As well, But it's so funny that my brother and sisters and I have laughed since then, the things that we have found out about them, particularly my mother, like lies that she told us we found out about her childhood and stuff. Like, she was a friggin' mess, man. But she tried to come across as being, having it all together, when in actuality, she was just as much of a mess as the rest of us.
Right. She would have shared that with you. It probably would have been so much better for your relationship.
Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. But, when you live a lie, you tell lies. Yeah. And so it's been awesome as an adult to realize we are all flawed.
Oh,
all
sure.
of us.
It's funny. The more that I've been vulnerable, the more that I've opened up about my own story, I found like, wow, I'm not that special. Mm-hmm. There's so many other people out there that experience the same stuff, if not worse. Yep. So it's like, what am I holding back for? And that's always been going to this retreat and stuff really like awakened something inside of me, where I was like, I had put on this exterior front of like, I've had 6 back surgeries, I've recovered, no medication, I'm tough, this and that. And although that's true, I am a gritty dude and I'm tough and I can do things that I set my mind to. There was a lot of underneath stuff that I really wasn't talking about, like the compassion and the love that I have for humanity and people and this and that. I really wasn't talking about that ever. It was always about mindsets, everything, winning and like this and that. And like, although that's a part of me, there's another side of me that I wasn't ever really talking about.
That's fascinating, Josh. Given particularly the name of your podcast is My Backstory. Yeah. Because we all have got a backstory.
Totally. But it's always been my guests sharing theirs, and I really wasn't. I mean, I'll chime in with a little bit of my story as I'm talking with my guests, but I really wouldn't. I didn't open up completely, And there's been multiple people that have been sending me messages like, hey man, when are you going to share your story?
Yeah.
When are you going to share your backstory?
Yeah.
And so I have a spiritual teacher that I work with. He actually put on the men's retreat that I went to, and now he's my personal coach. So I work with him one-on-one. And we talked Wednesday, and he said, how about I interview you for you sharing your story?
Yeah, good.
And he's like, because there's a lot about you that I don't know, and I think it would make it pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And he's going to pull things out of me that like most people wouldn't. And he's been the only man ever that's been able to crack me like big time, you know, and really make me own my edges and own my insecurities and step into my power, you know. So I honor him, and I really hope that we can get that going, and it'll come across and help other guys that are probably struggling with the same stuff that I do.
We're all struggling with this. That's the thing, is that I think as men, we touched on this a little bit earlier, is that if we show our vulnerabilities, then it's viewed as a weakness.
Right.
But among who?
Right.
The people that doesn't matter to. But most people, what I've learned is the more I've shared my story about failures and addictions and all that kind of stuff, people are like, thanks for sharing that, because I was hiding it. And there's freedom when you just saying it out loud. It gets in the light, you know. It takes the power. Yeah. It takes the power out of it. So you had 6 back surgeries without medication? Yeah,
so I had 6 back surgeries, and the last back surgery that I was having, I was addicted to every opiate you can imagine.
Yeah, me too.
Methadone, fentanyl, Oxycontin, morphine sulfate, all of it. And when I got divorced, I was like, well, I really need to get my life together, like, because I am a total mess. And I already had 5 back surgeries at the time, so I was taking anti-anxiety medication, sleeping pills, Adderall. I mean, that was all of it.
Yeah.
And so I quit everything cold turkey.
Wow.
Just one day, I was like, I'm done. And I threw it all down the toilet. And like, I had family members like, oh, let me have some of that. I was like, nope, I can't have this poison. I don't want anybody else that I love having it, especially not people that I love.
Yeah.
So I had 3 seizures from quitting everything cold turkey.
Yeah.
It was scary. It was tough. It was a challenge. It was... I don't know. It was, I think it was my growth edge, you know, because it really taught me a lot about myself.
Right.
And then I wanted to share that story. But as that story goes, you know, like there was a lot of things where like I still struggle with anxiety and panic attacks and things every once in a while. You know, a lot of it's just the trauma that I experienced, and it's coming to the surface every once in a while. And there's times where I couldn't breathe through it. I couldn't win. And so I would take an anti-anxiety pill, and I was so afraid to share that story with people. Like, oh my God, like, I can't believe that I caved and I took an anti-anxiety pill. But it was like a matter of, okay, I'm freaking out, having a panic attack, and I can't really function in life, and I'm not showing up for my family, or I can take this pill and it can calm me down. I can get centered again and like refocus and get back in the game. And so I had to share that because I had this big, huge fear of being a fraud, of like sharing the story of like, you know, I don't want to be a fraud. I don't want people to judge me. And just recently it's like, no, I'm opening up about all of it. You know, like I've never gone back down the rabbit hole of pain pills. So when I had that last back surgery, I made the decision that I would take the drugs they gave me while I was in the hospital. But when I left, that was it. I was done. So I got home and I gutted it out. It was a 12-hour operation, and it went through my stomach, my back, 12 hours. It was 2 rods, I think 10 screws, 3 wedges. They did an osteotomy, took pieces of my spine out. So it was a huge surgery.
Yeah.
And I got home, and it was like running a marathon in the Serengeti. Like every morning I would wake up just drenched in sweat because I was fighting through it the entire night.
Sure.
Because the nights were the shittiest because my wife's asleep and I'm alone in my pain, you know. So I would, in small little increments, I would get through the night. And part of what I would do was kind of like a Zen meditation where I would just completely shut my mind off. And I was like, I'm going to let my body do whatever it's going to do, shake, sweat, whatever. And I'm going to shut my mind off and not think at all.
Yeah.
And I would do that like sometimes in 5-minute increments, sometimes in 30-second increments just to get through the night.
Yeah.
And then I started the podcast, and I called it My Backstory because I wanted to share like my story. And so it was like a play on words, you know.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's really good.
So yeah, I've talked a little bit about that, you know, on the podcast, but not really my whole entire story.
Yeah.
But yeah, so now here I am, and I'm doing the work. I'm showing up, and there's times where I struggle. You know, there's times where I have bad days that are shitty. You know, but I get through them. You know.
Well, I love that you share this because there are some people who have bad days who don't know that they're going to get through it. Right. I remember when my former spouse and I were still living in San Francisco, and she was having a very difficult time, and I remember she was telling me about that she was having, she didn't use this word, but this is what they were, panic attacks and anxiety. Yeah. And she said, do you know what I mean by that? Have you ever had that happen? It's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And just that morning, I had to pull my car off the side of the road and white knuckle the steering wheel because I was having a panic attack. I couldn't even tell the truth to my wife, who was asking me in her most vulnerable time, do you know what I mean, honey? I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Wow. We need more men that are saying, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. I've been there before. But I was on I don't know, a similar version, but when you told your backstory, when I was still in the reserves, living up in San Francisco, I was in 12th Special Forces Group when we were doing a demonstration at a air show up at Hamilton Army Airfield. I think it was at Hamilton. So we parachuted out, and I had a mid-air entanglement with one of my teammates. And so we kind of, make a long story short, plummeted to the earth, and I landed flat on my back. Terry Millard got a compound fracture in his leg and his femur. I think it was his femur. Anyway, there was an ambulance there, thank goodness, saved him, because, you can bleed out from a femoral thing, right? But I jumped up and didn't realize till later on that I'd actually pulled 3 ribs away from my vertebrae, and I couldn't even, you got so much adrenaline pumping, and a teammate of ours was getting married that afternoon, Mike Plessis, shout out to Mike Plessis. And so we went to the wedding, and we kept telling the story over and over again about this entanglement. And so what happens, I get a rush of adrenaline every time we tell the story. I didn't realize how badly I was hurt until I went home that night.
Oh, wow. And
I go to lay down and realize, oh my gosh. And I'd had plenty of back injuries, but this was pretty gnarly. Yeah. But it was at that point I've been able to put my finger on it, that same thing, opioids. And then I hit my bottom when I realized I was going to a friend's house and stealing Vicodin and Percocet from friends' medicine cabinets.
Yep.
And I kind of had this little bit of an out-of-body experience, like, do you see what you're doing right now? Yeah. And I was plugged with that for years, and it wasn't until after the divorce that I finally kind of cleaned that up, and I didn't even tell people about it, But that was pretty ugly. So that you can go through these back surgeries and go through this is powerful. I'm glad you're telling people this story, man, because between anxiety and drugs, I was on Zoloft for a long time as well. And I did the same thing. I just said, I can't do this anymore. It's not just taking the lows out, but it's taking the highs out as well. But if you do, I wouldn't recommend anybody do any of the things that I've done. Consult with your physician.
I tell everybody that.
But for me, I had done enough emotional work where I knew I didn't need it anymore.
Yeah. I tell everyone that I share my story with, like, listen, I'm not recommending anybody to do it the way that I do, like cold turkey and stuff like that. It's not the smartest decision probably, but for me it was. Yeah. And that's what I needed, and that's what I did, and I lived to tell the tale. I mean, it could have been bad. I could have died, And like when I had those seizures, I was at a buddy's house, and so it was like I could have been driving when that happened, but luckily I was at his house and had the first seizure, and then another one like right after. He like dragged me to the couch and was like smacking me, and I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Oh no, I woke up on the kitchen floor, and I'm like, what am I doing down here? And so he dragged me to the couch. I came to on the couch again, and then I got up to look at all the holes in the drywall that I put in the drywall from seizing, and when I stood up to go look, next thing I know, I woke up and there was like firefighters all around me, and I was like, oh wow, this isn't good. Yeah. So the first thing they want to do is like pump you up with drugs, you know, and I'm like, no, absolutely not. And that's the thing with that. I think a lot of things that's not being talked about is that when you have like an injury or you have something go wrong with you, they send you to pain management. The surgeon releases you, you go to pain management. And then that becomes like the drug peddling thing. It's like, okay, well, this drug, I don't really like the way that makes me feel. Well, let's try another one. Mm-hmm. So then you try another one, and then they give you another drug to counteract that side effect. And this and that. Next thing you know, you're on a cocktail of drugs. And what I was doing, I wasn't going to a friend's house and stealing stuff, but I was doctor shopping big time. Yes. So I knew friends and people that were like, oh, this doctor will prescribe you anything. This doctor will give you anything. So I was going from doctor to doctor to doctor and getting any and every drug that I wanted. Mm-hmm. And I was a mess, waking up in the morning, taking all the drugs just to function. And then, okay, it's been a couple hours, right? Let me take an Adderall to get me going, and then take, up to 60 milligrams of amphetamine salt a day. And then at the end of the night, it's like, I need to come down, I'm too like amped up. So more pain pills, and then wash that down with an anti-anxiety pill and with an Ambien. And so I'd be sending messages to people on social media and stuff and wouldn't remember so I'd be getting messages the next day and be like, who are these people messaging me? They're people I had messaged the night before. Thankfully, I don't think any of the messages were bad.
Yeah.
But they could have been.
Yep.
You know, I went to the gym a couple times and didn't even remember going.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was terrible. So I was getting that amnesia stuff. You know,
Yeah.
it's like this.
And isn't it amazing, being in the veteran space, you hear about how this happens at the VA, well, a lot of places. Yeah. And it's no wonder that people end up, you know, taking their own life. They're not in their normal state of mind.
Yeah.
You know, when you realize the cocktail or the list of drugs that people are on,
yeah.
These are mind altering.
Yeah. No, it caused me to like really question humanity and question like my own life. Like, I'm probably better off dead. You know, this is crazy. You know, and at that time, I mean, it would have been easy to just pull the trigger.
Sure.
Easy, because I was just so numb. And people were asking me like, "Oh, what did it feel like to be on all those drugs and stuff?" I was like, to be honest with you, I was just numb.
Yep.
That's what it felt like.
Yeah. Like
numb to everything. Like I felt nothing.
Yeah.
Like I didn't cry. I didn't laugh. I was very serious, and like I was just dead inside. There was nothing to me.
Was this with your new wife or with your former wife or in between?
Former, yeah. So when I got with my wife that I'm married to now, I had just come off of everything. And so she kept hearing stories from people from the past, you know, like, oh man, you should see what this guy was doing back in whenever. And she's like, that's not the guy I know at all. You know, like that doesn't even sound like him. Yeah. And I had gone through this like whole spiritual awakening of like, no, I'm better than this. And I'm going to I was reading a lot of, I read like Paramahansa Yogananda, the autobiography of the yogi. Yeah. A lot of Wayne Dyer. He was like my go-to guy. That's all right. And, so yeah, I was kind of on a journey, you know, so she got me kind of at my peak when I was like really feeling good about myself. Things were awesome. And then I went back to work and was like working in the pressures of work, and I didn't go back down the opiate stuff, but there were other things I was doing that weren't good, you know, the drinking and carrying on and just the anger and hurt and whatever. Yeah. So since we've been together, I quit drinking and just kind of try to keep it as clean as possible. Yeah. But the other thing I do is I'm very transparent with her. So like I wouldn't share with her if I took an anti-anxiety pill because I couldn't manage my day. I wouldn't tell her. No way. Absolutely not. I never ever discussed it with her. And
with your former spouse, you mean?
With my current spouse.
Oh, okay.
So there's been times where after I got off all the drugs, like where I couldn't manage my day, where I was like, I am freaking out right now. I'm having a full-on panic attack, and I don't know what to do. And I'm trying the breath work. I'm trying the cold showers. I'm trying everything that I can't seem to get right, you know, in the head. And I don't know what's wrong. And so there was times where I'd be like, okay, I'm just going to take a pill because I need to. Like I can't function right now. Yeah. And I wouldn't tell her. I wouldn't own that with her. And so since that retreat, that's been one of the things where it's like, no, it's full transparency. Everything, financially, emotionally, everything I got going on in my life, you're going to know about. I'm not holding anything back from you anymore. Because I was doing the same thing that you were doing financially. I was not sharing with her, you know, what issues we had. I wasn't, not that she's not a dumb person. She's extremely intelligent. But I think she just gave me the grace to just do whatever it is she felt that I needed to do, you know? So it's like, traveling all over the country, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. She had no clue, like where I was putting that money, how I was getting it, what I was, nothing. And then until I came back from the retreat, I was like, no, we need to talk, and we're going to get this all right. You know? Good for you. So I was like, we're putting the traveling on hold for right now. And right when I said that, when I made that, and I set that intention for myself, like, no, I'm going to start, I need to be home with my family, and the traveling needs to stop. It's not paying dividends financially right now, so I need to like make
boundaries.
Yeah, I need to make boundaries, and it needs to make more sense. Right when I said that, a bunch of people, hey, dude, you should do podcasts here, all in California. And I'm like,
see,
thank you, thank you. You know? So it all worked out, you know. And I was getting kind of burned on the traveling, and I think it was increasing like a little bit of my anxiety and stuff like that because getting out. I mean, like you said before, like there's some things about you that are very introverted, and I'm the same way. Where it's like I can get out and I can function and put on a face and do my thing. Yeah. But getting outside of like my castle and traveling to different people that I don't know, that's way out of the comfort zone. So it put me in, I always came home like just wound up, you know, like, oh geez, you know. And my therapist told my wife, like, give him a couple days when he gets home to just don't like bombard him with stuff. Like let him get home and unwind because he's freaking out when he gets home.
And recharge.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. So how did your current spouse, bride, how did she respond when you said, I'm going to be completely transparent about everything? Like even about the anxiety?
I think she cried. I think we were at the therapist, and she was asking me how the retreat went or whatever, and I couldn't stop crying. I was telling her, I was like, oh man, like you don't understand, like the awakening that happened there, and like just all kinds of stuff came off the surface. And so my wife was crying because she's never seen me like that ever. I've never showed that side of me, and we've never been more close in our life ever in our entire relationship. It's always been a push and pull, a very jockeying for position all the time, me always trying to power over when it's like she's been waiting patiently for me to step into my authentic power of a man, like just to step into my power and be who I am. And she used to say like little subtle things, like when you step into your power, like you're really gonna accomplish like great things, like when you finally do that. And okay, whatever. And so now she sees it, and our conversations are completely different. When I get frustrated or upset with something we're talking about, whatever, I'm like, okay, where's this frustration coming from? Okay. And then the other thing that really has helped me is like, how am I meeting my wife? Am I meeting her from the wounded, scarred, hurt child, or am I meeting her from the empowered man, the empowered, confident man? Like, where am I meeting her from? And in the past, it was most of the time was from the wounded child. I was speaking to her from the wounded child. I was responding to her from the wounded child.
Of course.
Fear, insecurity, lack, like all these things that are that are disempowering. And so it's been a huge, huge shift, not just with her, but with my kids too, especially the 12-year-old. He can really see that. He asked me the days, like, you gonna be like some hippie now? And I was like, yeah, maybe, the violent hippie, as Mitch Aguirre says, So it's been a great like transition, and I think like me coming up and meeting people, like I want to share that work with people. Be like, especially men, not that women don't need it too, but like for the men, it's like, it's so empowering. I think that when you look at like these mass shootings and stuff like that, these are not empowered men doing these things.
No, they're not.
These are shattered, broken men that didn't have the proper guidance. That's the truth. It's not the gun that's the problem. It's these people, that they're hurt. They're hurting inside. And so if I can do anything to like help people, that's I think that's my purpose in life.
I kind of feel a similar calling, but I wrap it up in entrepreneurial coaching, I spend more time talking about this kind of stuff with clients than I do about the balance sheet.
No, it's powerful. It's powerful.
Well, it is, because when you realize that we're all broken in some way, and when you realize that, then you can kind of move on. I just go back that reality is our friend. There's no reason to be hiding anymore.
Right.
So I think it's awesome.
It feels like freedom, when you don't have to hide anymore.
Well, it's contrary to what you think when you're in it. Like if I share this and people are going to think that I'm weak or that I'm not a man or that I don't know how to run a business or whatever it is. But it's really the contrary. Because people know, they may never be able to put words around it, but they know that something's up. You're hiding something.
Right.
You're not, people can sniff out inauthentic behavior, right?
Totally.
And inauthentic behavior tends to manifest itself in addictions, anger, that kind of thing.
Totally.
So it's much more rewarding to be on this side, though, than on the other side. The journey is a pain in the ass for sure at times, but if it's worth having, like what we've got now, it's worth fighting for.
Absolutely.
And sometimes you don't even know that it's going to be a fight. You don't even know what you're missing out on until you got it. And that's why I want to talk so transparently about my journey, is because I didn't know how good things could be. I had no idea. I had no one modeling it for me.
Yeah, I didn't know either. I showed up to that retreat like so scared. Like I was like, man, I'm going to be around these guys that are nothing like who I've associated with in the past.
Yeah.
And I even had like a contingency plan to get me out of there.
Oh, God.
It was like I had a military buddy, or he's a friend of a friend. But he, was ex-law enforcement, this and that. But he had friends that lived in the area, and they said, "Listen, so this is what's going to happen. If it doesn't work out, then we got this guy to come and get you out of here. And, here's the, the charger that, can start a car battery if you need it. So you always got, power for your phone." And he took it all serious and whatever. And I was legitimately like apprehensive about it. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to assimilate in this group.
Yeah.
And to walk into such warm, like welcoming dudes with a lack of judgment was like so huge. It was like instantaneous where I was like, wow, I'm at home. Like this, I felt at home like immediately. And I was like, wow.
Most men have never had that before.
It was a trip. I'm going to ask you a couple questions that I ask everyone. If you had one lesson that you learned your entire life, the biggest lesson that you learned, that you could save somebody else some of the heartaches that you've experienced, and we've talked about some of them, and you could share that one lesson with somebody coming up, what would that lesson be that you would want to share, the main lesson, and why?
Wow. I don't know if there's a main one, but there's a few that are kind of wrapped and intertwined together.
Yeah.
And we talked about this, is don't believe everything that you think.
Yeah.
I mean, if I would have believed my entire life what I thought about myself, that I wasn't worthy, I wasn't good enough, I was just a dummy, I'd probably be in a ditch or in prison or dead. So when you believe in something, be willing to fight for it. I don't care whether it's you believe that you ought to be winning this football game or, whatever it is. You're in the military, whatever it is you're fighting for, tenacity eats talent for lunch. You got to drive on. You got to be willing to fight for it. Tenacity, I think, is an underrated skill or talent or gift or attribute for people. So many people think if I had more money, I could be better in business. If I had access to capital, or if I had a better education or a better network or whatever it is. Sometimes life is just about grinding it out when other people are willing to quit. And so tenacity, I think, is an important one. And then just surrounding yourself with people who love you. Preferably those people are also bolder and brighter than you are as well, and they see the potential and capacity in you that you might not see in yourself.
That's huge.
And I would flip that to say, as a leader, and particularly as a man, I think that we need to speak potential into people. Like I try to do this with my children especially. I let them know they've got the goods. They may not see it. I do it with our team members here in our organization. I do it with people that I coach and mentor. I try to see the good in them, the potential in them that they don't see because they're in the weeds. They can't even see around them sometimes. So I think those kind of things are
That's awesome.
important to me.
I just had that conversation with my son on the way to school today.
Oh, is that right?
Well, he was signing something for Spanish class, and so I had to sign it. He had to sign it, and his penmanship is, it's terrible, So I was like, we were in the car, and I said, listen, your penmanship doesn't make me love you or not love you because your penmanship isn't great. I love you for who you are. I'm so proud of you for the character that you have, the love that you have, the compassion that you have. But your penmanship is important because people look at the way you write and it's a reflection on you. So when you look at musicians and you see these big time great musicians, they didn't learn how to play guitar just overnight. It took practice, it took persistence, and a commitment and dedication to their craft.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to your penmanship, it's not like one day you're going to wake up and have good penmanship.
Yeah.
You're going to have to practice at this. You have to sit down and commit that you're going to do good and you're going to figure it out.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to send the message of love first and be like, listen, I love you. And it doesn't change the way I feel about you, that I don't like the way that you write. I just know that you can fix it. And as your dad, it's my job to push you to be better than what you're presenting right now.
Yeah. And so small things that will, if you can learn the small things, you'll realize that it impacts the bigger things in life as well.
Definitely. Yeah. And, I told him thank you. I think as his dad, I was like, if I just sat on the sidelines and just allowed you to just go through the motions, I'm doing you a disservice. I'm not helping you to be better. So for me, I didn't have that guidance growing up. I didn't have my dad being like, oh, Likewise. You should do it this way,
Likewise. Yeah, I've had to have that conversation with my kids as well. It's like, I am saying this because I love you. Totally. I'm not being firm with you because I dislike you.
Right.
If I disliked you, if I didn't care, I wouldn't say anything. I'd let you go right off the cliff.
Yep. It's a tough lesson to learn. And I think, growing up playing football and stuff, you had football coaches that didn't even speak to some of the kids. They didn't say anything. And then you had the football coaches. I mean, he'd be like, my football coach in particular was just all over me all the time.
Yeah.
And then it took me as an adult to find it like, oh wow,
now I get it.
He was doing that because like he loved me and he knew that I was not giving my best, you know, and he saw it in me.
Yeah.
And so to this day we're still friends. You know, I reached out to him as an adult and was like, man, I gotta thank you, because everything I went through in life, I went back to like my football experience and been like, wow, if it wasn't for that, I don't think I would have accomplished some things I did.
That's right. Yeah.
So it was really cool.
Yeah.
The other question I want to ask you, if you had one person or one book that inspired you the most your entire life, who would that person be and what would that book be and why?
Well, book kind of popped into my brain first is a book by Richard Bach, the guy who wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagull, but he wrote a book called Illusions. I remember reading after I'd graduated high school, and it kind of opened up my eyes. So it was a subtitle, Way of the Reluctant Messiah, I think is what it was called.
Right.
And it opened up my eyes to the powers and possibility of thinking. And it was an easy read. So that one I've given to my son. It was kind of the precursor for personal development and personal improvement.
Yeah.
For me. So Illusions. Inspiring people. I'm blessed that I've got tons of people in my life that inspire me. Yeah. What I've learned over the years is that there's no one person who encapsulates everything. Yeah. We are all broken. We've all got hidden scars and wounds, and there's no one person's life I want to emulate. Right. But I'll tell you the person who inspires me, and it came up yesterday in a talk, and so I'll just mention it because I've mentioned him before. And that's my twin brother. In that he's a smart guy, went into the military the same time I did, went in as a 91 Bravo in the Army. That was the basic combat medic kind of guy, take your blood pressure, give you a Band-Aid, give you ibuprofen, and drink some water and get back out there kind of guy, right? But he went on to become a physician's assistant, an orthopedic surgeon, and having his own, being in a practice in Colorado Springs, and then becoming a naturopathic physician and having his own practice and doing really well.
That's so cool.
To about, I don't know, I'm going to guess 15 years ago or more, him saying, I hate this. I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to go back to what my real love and my real passion is, and that's martial arts.
Nice.
And he gave up what was outwardly this really successful medical practice, midlife, in his 40s probably, and say, screw it, this isn't fulfilling to me. I can make a bigger impact on the world. I can meet, me, who I am, through martial arts. That's awesome. So he got rid of the practice, and now he's a full-time martial artist and has since been inducted in, I don't know, lost count, 8 maybe different martial arts halls of fame. Been in a couple of movies. He was assistant coach of the USA sport jiu-jitsu team that took gold at the World last year. He's assistant coach again this year for it. The guy's a freaking stud. He's doing movies and rubbing elbows with people that, when I was younger, we thought were absolute heroes in the martial arts community. Yeah.
You know Tony Blauer?
I don't know.
Yeah, he's been on the podcast. He's a martial arts guy. He has the Spear program and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And he's here in Encinitas, and I'm sure your brother knows who he is.
Yeah. So he's one of the guys who inspires me. Who says it's never too late to really chase your dream, and still make an impact on the world. So I am blessed, like I said, that there's tons of people who inspire me. Jeff Bosley, who's been on your show. Yeah. Jeff and I haven't even met face to face, but he inspires me based on his story.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy that he left like a career, went from the military.
A couple of careers for crying out loud that he could have been successful in.
And they're like, you know what? I'm going to follow my passion and I'm out of here, and living the life of like a struggling actor, truly, and it's like, and embracing it. And embracing it. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So there's people like that all the time I run across. And that's the great thing I think about life now. I try to, I was joking around earlier that left to my own devices, I'd be living in the dark side and calling people garbage like I used to. I don't trust any of you. People are evil and all that kind of stuff. Yes, but the great thing is people are freaking awesome. There are dozens of people around me that inspire me every day. Yep. They don't make the news. You know why? Because it's not rare.
Yeah.
There's more good stuff going on in the world than there is bad stuff.
I agreed.
But if you just look at the news, that's all you see. Well, why? Well, because it's news. It's rare.
Right.
You know?
They sensationalize it.
And it's sensationalized, absolutely.
Yeah, totally.
But I'm living the dream, you know, with amazing people around me all the time. Look at like you. I mean, I wouldn't have met you had I not been out there doing what I do. So, you know, you're one more guy who's like, I'm inspired by. I love hearing your story. I want to hear more.
Thanks,
you know, so.
That. What's a legacy you want to leave? If you knew like you were gonna die tomorrow, what would you want to be remembered for? What would you want your legacy to be?
Yeah. This might sound cliche, but first of all, that I was an awesome dad in spite of being a fuck up. And potentially, had I not straightened out, being a drain and an embarrassment in their life. I want my kids to be proud of me more than anything else. You know, that I want them to say, yeah, that was my dad. So there's that. But I've also recognized the power of entrepreneurship and leadership. And so I commit every day to helping create more leaders and entrepreneurs because particularly given where I was, that I thought that maybe getting involved in politics and government was really going to help save the country. I realize now that that's a big lie that I was telling myself, that it's really the power of entrepreneurship and capitalism that has lifted more people out of poverty, saved more lives, created more wealth than anything else when you look around the world. Yeah. And so what I'm trying to do is just create more leaders and entrepreneurs through my efforts of training and coaching them. And I happen to have a hotel company. If my name is never attached to it, I'm really cool with that. But I know at this point, I've coached and mentored thousands of entrepreneurs that are doing their small little things and creating awesome. Opportunity, and making a difference. And in many cases, not all, but in many cases, breaking that multi-generational curse of poverty that a lot of us have grown up in.
That's awesome, man. I think we all struggle with, for me, like with that mindset we were talking about earlier about like, don't be too big for your britches. You know? I think a lot of us are like, especially for me, like I'm like, I don't want to get too big or do this or whatever. And you small play like everything, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't know, it needs to shift somewhere. You need to find that balance of like, I can be, like you said, like strive for excellence in everything you do. Mm-hmm. And I think if you do that every day and you're striving for excellence in everything you do, whether it be communication, whether it be like how you show up to work, how you do this, you're bound to be successful.
Well, I think so. But the successful thing, the pursuit of success, I think is, we got it wrong. There's so many people that have this fake success on social media. You know, they're showing their car and their watch and the cash in the front seat of the car. It is so false and phony that my fear is that that's what we're equating to success.
What's your definition of success?
Freedom. That I get to do what I want when I want to do it, and to make an impact on the world. However, I think that if you just chase success, your life is going to be empty and hollow. It's not. What I would encourage people to do, because I used to do that, I used to chase success. Right. And back then I used to think that success was a zero-sum gain. If you were winning, I was losing. And so I was the guy that would have my boot on your throat as we climb the ladder. But what I encourage people to do now is stop chasing success, but instead pursue a life of significance. Yeah. Play a significant role in the life of your family. Play a significant role in your house of worship. Play a significant role in your business, whether you own it or you're a team member there. Play a significant role in your community, and the coaching young men and women to do great things. When you pursue a life of significance, success is the byproduct of that. Right. If you pursue significance, success is going to come. It might come in a way you had no idea where it was going to come from, right. But if you're just pursuing quote-unquote success, this is where the addictions come from. Yep, they really do. And I wouldn't wish that on anybody, having been on both sides of that. So
how would you tell somebody that's struggling to find their purpose or find their passion? How would they do that?
how would they find their purpose or passion?
Purpose and passion, yeah. Because I think a lot of people struggle with it. They don't even know what they want to do.
Oh yeah, yeah. And so there's days I don't really know what I want to do. It takes a lot of self-reflection. It takes what you and I were talking about earlier. You've got to humble yourself. You got to stare at your navel for a while. You got to be quiet and just listen to the world. But I would say, where are you spending your time? Where are you finding joy? I've got a friend of mine who is an Air Force veteran who retired, and she was coaching and doing a lot of training in the negotiation arena. It's been very interesting watching her over the last couple of years, because just on a whim, she went on a mission trip to Kenya, and now she's finding her passion is helping these women entrepreneurs in Kenya, and so she's bringing their products here to the U.S., selling them for them. They get the proceeds, and then these women are going to school and becoming better versions of themselves and creating a legacy for their families, right? And she stumbled on it. So I don't think you find your purpose by just thinking about it. You've got to actually get out there and do things that you've never done before. Go on that mission trip or volunteer for something. Most people's purpose, what I have found, is outside themselves. Yeah. It's serving other people. I'm just a big believer that when you don't know what to do, when your life is caving in around you, serve somebody else. Serve someone else, and you'll find meaning there. It is it's so counterintuitive, but somehow the universe, the moon, and the stars align for you when you humble yourself and serve somebody else first. A lot of veterans get this, I think. Military folks get this because they've gone into the service. They've served others, and they come out, and oftentimes, this is why they oftentimes make great leaders and great entrepreneurs. Not all, but many, because they continue to serve people. I think this is why the greatest generation, the World War II vets, made such an impact on the world, is because they came back and just served, and they didn't do a lot of whining and crying about it, but they just come back and serve their families for the most part, right? I think there's that opportunity now. I think that the generation now that's coming out of the military, they could be our next greatest generation, Right. Like my generation was a bunch of selfish, me first kind of people. Right. And it took a lot of pain for me to get to where I am right now. But my hope is if we play our cards right, that we've got another great generation coming up. Yeah,
and you're starting a new trend, with your son. He's going to grow up.
That's my hope.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I do look at that. That is my primary role right now. My daughter, yes, I understand the responsibility that comes with creating a great relationship. A father-daughter relationship is very special. And honey, if you're hearing this, I do feel like I have a greater responsibility to create a powerful, loving, caring, compassionate warrior of a man in my son.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Well, man, I think this is going to go down as probably one of my favorite podcasts I've ever done.
Oh, good.
To be honest with you, man.
Thanks.
I had lost a little bit of my juice, when I went to that retreat. I was, like I told you, I was very tied into the military community and doing a lot of veteran stuff, and a lot of it was tied around mindset and perseverance and this and that, all things that are near and dear to my heart. But when I went to that retreat, I felt like I just lost a little bit of my edge where that was concerned. I was like, I lost the want and desire to I'm going to go and travel and do this and talk about, that's not where I am right now. I'm just not there right now.
Yeah.
And so having this conversation with you was so uplifting. It was wow, this is like a breath of fresh air, because it gives me juice back in my tank. Yes, these are the kinds of things I want to talk about.
Well, the great news is that you're in a part of the country where there's a lot of rock stars, like Bedros we had mentioned earlier. Yeah. There's a lot of people that are right here. Yep. Between LA and San Diego. And I am predicting that your podcast is going to get so big that people are going to they'll fly across the country to see you.
I appreciate that.
And that's what we're building a podcast studio right there, right on the other side of this wall. And that's what our hopes is as well, that people want to be here because you're touching so many people. The message that I think that you have and that a lot of your previous guests have is an important message that we all need to hear. And I think that if people get more transparent, I think the bigger impact. Transparency and authenticity is a rare trait.
It really is. And I think that's why I was losing I lost some of my juice at that retreat, because I was like, man, like I felt like maybe I wasn't being as transparent or vulnerable and open. I was letting my guests do that. And I was always pleasantly surprised by when you give people the vehicle to share their story and they just share openly. It's like, whoa. I was like, blown away by some of my guests. And it seems like since I've been back from the retreat, I've done 3 episodes now since I've been back. And all 3 of them have been like very open and very honest. And I was like, wow, that's so cool. I think it's almost like
permission.
Right, totally. And when you give someone like, hey man, like you can share as much as you want. The tears can come. It's all good. Like there is no judgment here at all.
Yeah.
And so it's been, like I said, like a breath of fresh air, especially talking to you about the things that we talked about today. I'm like, wow, it was almost like it was meant to be.
Good.
So I'm super excited, and I can't wait to release this episode. But thank you so much for your willingness to come on and share your story and be vulnerable and share some of your failures, and what it took to get you where you are today.
Yeah, thanks, brother.
And I look forward to linking up again soon.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right,
Sounds
man.
Good.
Thank you for listening to Getting Real with Josh Boyer. If you're loving the podcast, please leave a rating and subscribe. You can follow us on all social media platforms and YouTube at gettingreal_. You can also check us out at joshboyer.com.